Welcome to a new series of ReadID webinars where we discuss interesting developments in the field of remote identity verification. It's great to see that a growing number of people has found his way to our webinars, and that's also the reason why we extend the series that we started last year into this new year. Hopefully also beyond the borders of the pandemic that we are currently in. My name is Will Jansen. I'm co-founder of ReadID, and in this discussion of our webinar we'll discuss some interesting new use cases of identity verification. We'll do that with our two guests. We'll have Sylvie van der Velde joining us from Brussels. Welcome, Sylvie. And here in the studio we have David Lamers, Innovation Manager at the Rabobank. In previous editions we've seen identity verification and ReadID being applied in banking, in trust service providers, for re-verification of customers. Many different use cases of remote identity verification. We've also seen the great application of ReadID in the UK Home Office EU settlement scheme. And today we want to extend this diversity of use cases with quite a few other ones, where identity verification also stretches beyond mere identity verification, but also towards sharing attributes and sharing personal data. And David and Sylvie will tell you a lot more about that. Please note that you can watch also our previous webinars and also this webinar from tomorrow on. You can watch them back on our website, and we'll provide you details with the link to those webinars later on the website. Our first guest is David Lamers. Welcome, David. Great that you could come here.
Thanks.
It's always great in these times that you can have a journey towards a different place here in Enschede. David is Innovation Manager at the Rabobank in the Netherlands. He's passionate about technology push and innovation. And he likes emerging technologies. That is why he started in the blockchain team of the Rabobank a few years ago. And then got interested in digital identities and self-sovereign identities. He's also product manager of the Rabobank IDA app. This app has generated quite some publicity, especially in the Netherlands, as it's an important component of the so-called field lab experiments. And those field lab experiments are trials to see how we can organize large-scale events in COVID times and after that. So it comprised dance events, congresses and things alike over the last few weeks. So very interesting to see how that worked out, and we'll come back to that later. David, to understand a bit more about why Rabobank is doing all these kind of things, can you explain a bit on how innovation at the Rabobank works, and how do you see the role of innovation within the Rabobank?
Yeah. Within Rabobank we have a large strategy and innovation department, and in that department we try to find new business models or optimize our current products for our customers, and we do that around a few strategic pillars. An example of those are, for instance, optimizing the core banking services, but also finding adjacent services next to our core banking services. But in the innovation department we also have a focus on the energy transition, for example, and also supporting the food and agri, the farmers in the Netherlands and worldwide. So around those strategic pillars we are looking for new opportunities. So we have ideation sessions, for example, to come up with new ideas. We work closely together with some startups to bring their ideas to the market and also to our customers. And I'm personally working for the Tech Lab. So there indeed we work on technology push innovation. So that means that we look into new emerging technologies. That can be, for example, blockchain, IoT, so Internet of Things, or quantum computing. And what we do is that we look into those technologies and dive into like how do they work and what kind of impact do they have on the bank, or can they have on the bank. And that can be sometimes a risk. So what you hear sometimes from quantum computing is that it is a risk for the cybersecurity part of the bank. But it can also be, for example, an opportunity for us as bank to apply quantum computing in our risk models, for example. And that's what I started to do 2 years ago with the blockchain team. Back then, we dived also into self-sovereign identity, which is a pretty common topic within the blockchain environment, blockchain space. I picked that up. So it's about digital identity and sharing personal data. And that's what I've been doing since then. And what happens in our innovation department is that we have an innovation funnel where we go through stage gauges to find the most best ideas. Yeah.
So on the one hand, the people inside the bank are your audience, but sometimes also the people outside of the bank.
Yeah, definitely both indeed. Most of the times the clients are within the banks, within the business lines. But we also have a large department, B2B services, where we also try to innovate together with our clients and help them also innovating their processes with, for example, new technologies. Yeah.
Well, in your activities, the IDA app that we already mentioned is an important component. Maybe it's good to have a look at what the IDA app does and how it works. And I think you brought a nice video with you that we can have a look at now.
Look at how far we've come, at all the choices we have, and at how easily we consume and arrange our affairs. Most services in today's market require us to share our personal data digitally. But do you know who you've shared your data with, or who's had access to it? And what happens to that data after you share it? We all want to keep control over our personal data, but we have no overview. All we can do is hope that our data doesn't end up in the wrong hands. We feel powerless and a lack of control. Our goal is to implement our digital highway and mobile app to make sharing your identity and your personal data easier, safer, and faster. This digital highway will connect consumers, governments, and third parties. With the consumer's consent, we'll ensure that only the most necessary and verified data will be shared with other parties. This saves a lot of time and money. The app can be used for multiple processes and life events, such as the mortgage process, renting a car, or identifying yourself. The app is really easy to use. After downloading the app, you receive a data request from a company which needs to be completed. You collect your personal data in real time directly from the source, meaning it is accurate, up-to-date, and reliable. The company receives only your most relevant personal data. You are in control by having a complete overview of your data and of all parties that have access to it. With this app, we ensure speed and time savings through the safe, adequate, and accurate exchange of data between consumers and companies. The future calls for a transformation. It's time for consumers to take back control of their identity information. It's time to future-proof our identities and our personal data.
In the video, it was mentioned to share your identity and personal data more secure and faster. But I guess that's the essence of the app. Can you tell a bit more about what we saw and why you've built IDA?
Yeah, indeed, IDA is all around personal data sharing services. So it's about sharing your personal data during business processes, and those processes can be anything. So that can be like if you want to rent a car, and you have to submit some personal data, you can use IDA. But even if you want to apply for a mortgage, or indeed, as you mentioned, visit an event, you can share your personal data with those companies that want to receive your data. And it's really focused about privacy, the proposition of IDA. And privacy is so very important to us. So it means that when you use IDA, we make use of data minimization techniques. So you only share really the necessary data points with the company that's asking for your data. And so you don't share the whole document, but only the required data points. And we also make use of new techniques like zero-knowledge proof that you can prove that you have something without sharing it. So that means that I can, for instance, prove that I'm older than 18 years old, but that I don't have to share my birth date. And that really is the proposition about IDA. And it means that if you're in a data request from such a company, the IDA app checks if the data that is asked by the company is already in your wallet. And the app checks that for you. And if it's not in there, so if, for example, if it asks for your passport and the IDA app checks if it's in there and it's not there, then you can get some handvat in Dutch. We give you some way to receive the data that's required from the company. Mm-hmm. And then you can share it afterwards. Yeah. And with IDA, the data is really stored only on your mobile phone. So we, as a provider of IDA, as Rabobank, we don't see any of the personal data you store in the wallet or that you exchange any data at all. So it's really a decentralized solution, which is very important to us.
Yeah, so the data, the personal data, is cached with its source, and it's the fact that it is correct on your mobile phone, and under your control, consumer control, you can then hand it to any party that needs that data for a certain service. Yeah,
indeed. So we don't make a direct line between the issuer of the data and the receiver of the data, but it's really first handed over to you, and we make use of some techniques so that it's signed before it's handed over to you. So that also means that you cannot manipulate any of the data you have received. So when you hand it over to the party that wants to receive your data, they can be sure that it's real data, so that's not manipulated and that's indeed coming from the right source. So that also optimizes the processes on the verify side, so the party that's receiving the data, and they can really profit from making use of IDA in that way.
And that disconnection between the data source and the relying party, I guess that's a principle of self-sovereign identity. You as a user decide on who will get what from you. You mentioned it already earlier, self-sovereign identity. Mm-hmm. It's a term that you hear a lot in the context of blockchain as well. But how do you view this concept, and how does that pop up in what we saw just now in the IDA app?
Yeah, well, self-sovereign identity is mainly an ideology that you really have control over your own data. And it's an international known principle. There are some design principles around self-sovereign identity. For example, that you should have an independent existence. So you should not rely on a party that's providing the solution. That you should have some means of data consent and withdrawing data. Withdrawing your consent that the party that wants to receive the data has access to it. And next to that ideology, you have some architecture around it as well. So some technical standards that are being implemented by self-sovereign identity solutions. And those are, for example, verifiable credentials, which means that is the signed data structure that's stored in the wallet itself. And that's basically what self-sovereign identity is about. So having full control over your own data in a privacy-friendly way.
Yeah. That's about IDA. Webinar is about ReadID. Where does ReadID fit into this picture? How does IDA use ReadID?
Yeah, so well, what we mentioned, like IDA, is about your digital identity and belonging data attributes about you. And for your digital identity, we have experienced that a lot of companies that want to make use of IDA, that they also ask for some digital identity or your personal information that's on your passport. And we found that using the SDK of Innovaler, that gives us the opportunity to get the basic digital identity, the first digital identity, and the user is able to load that into their IDA wallet on the phone, and we do so by using the NFC technology, which really was successful also during the last weeks during the pilots. So that's how we make use of.
You mentioned the pilots, the field lab experiments were really interesting experiments that happened over the last few weeks in the Netherlands, ranging from soccer matches with I think 1,500 visitors, conferences, but even dance events in the Ziggo Dome in Amsterdam. There you use the IDA app and ReadID. How does this work? What's the customer journey that somebody follows? So how does he or she see IDA and ReadID in that customer journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what our final goal was during those field lab events is that the visitor of the event could prove that he was tested negatively the last 48 hours before the event. And of course that also this negative corona test was bound to him as a person. When he was entering the event, he had to prove that. And what we did was in the first stage of the process, so the first stage of the customer journey, we had the list of visitors of the event, and the test lab had to receive all the personal information of the visitor. So all the test labs in the Netherlands, they need like all your personal data from your passport document, and that's where in the first step we already make use of ReadID. So the visitor receives a data request from the test lab. And the data request contains a request for the passport, driving license, or an ID card. They can choose what kind of documents they want to use. And the data request goes into the IDA wallet, which checks if the data is already in the wallet itself. And if it's not, which was the case for most of the visitors, well, they could make use of ReadID to read the passport or document data. And that was then stored into the wallet, and then they could submit their passport data to the test lab. Well, and then the day itself, so the day of the event, the visitor arrived at the test street, and the test street could see the person into their system, find that person, and connect the test kit ID to that person, take a test, and when the test result was available, well, it was reached out to the IDA wallet again, to the IDA wallet of the visitor, and there we made a unique connection between the test result and the digital identity that was in the IDA wallet, which was retrieved by ReadID.
And what the people checking at the gate would see the image of the person, but none of the other details, date of birth, of anything that you knew.
Yeah, indeed. So they only saw the passport photo, and if the person had access, and then you had access when you had a negative corona test in the last 48 hours.
Yeah. And that's again on minimizing data, keeping the stuff private, as well as exploiting also the pass photo that's in your passport at high resolution. So for the people that don't know that, in the chip, in the passport, you have a high resolution picture of yourself, which is much better than the copied one, which can be used for identification.
Yeah, that was also great. Like people really experience that. Like when they make use of the NFC technology, the picture appears there in a color. Even though it's in black and white on your document. So they're also really surprised about the technology. That was what we also experienced. Like they are not that familiar yet with such innovative technology. And we indeed reused the picture to connect it to the test result. And that works very well.
Yeah, that also means that you have to use this kind of electronic identity documents, because there are no databases with pictures of people and things like it, at least not in the Netherlands. Quite some questions popping in from the chat. I want to move to one of them, which is asked by Laurent. And he asks, when is ReadID used in this journey? Is it just for onboarding, or also in later stages in the customer journey?
Well, when you install the IDA app, it's basically empty, so you can start adding any data attributes you want. So you can decide on your own if you want to start adding your passport or maybe an income statement, for example. And in this journey specific at the Field Lab event, most of the people started with an empty wallet because they didn't make use of IDA before. And when the data request came in from the test lab, it asked for their passport data. So at that moment, they started adding the document by ReadID.
So it's not an onboarding the app. The app is an empty wallet that you get, but at the moment that it's needed, you have to add your identity credentials or do the identity verification.
Yeah, indeed. We wanted to keep the onboarding of the app pretty simple, and since it's also decentralized, we don't have to make use of any accounts or that data is stored in the cloud. So you can just start with an empty app if wanted, and it also means that, well, for example, if you just want to make use of IDA and there's no ID documents required, no digital identity required, well, then you also don't have to make use of ReadID and adding a document.
No. The experiments have taken place only very recently, but can you already tell a bit about the feedback? You said people were surprised that they have that kind of data in their passport, but anything else? Did they like it, or were they just so pleased that they could go out once again?
Yeah, no. What was really nice was that when the test was done, they still had to wait 50 minutes waiting for the test result. So it's not allowed that they would go out on the street again. So they had to wait 50 minutes. So that was for us a perfect opportunity to interview them and do a questionnaire, indeed. And what we experienced there was that it was really important also for that we inform them very well what is happening in the IDA app. So it's a pretty new concept, of course, that it's totally decentralized technique, and they think that, well, if the passport was read using the NFC technology, that it will be sent directly to the event and maybe also to the test lab. But that's really what we want to prevent. So you really have to give explicit consent of sharing your data. And that's something they are not familiar with, because in most of the apps you use, it's directly sent to a lot of parties, all your personal data. So it's important for us that they are informed very well. And we also learned that some of the people just click through very easily, so they don't read very well, which is of course not a problem, but it's good to know how we handle their data, because they expect, as said, that it's shared with a lot of parties, but we don't.
Yeah, you need explicit consent, and just clicking fast in order to get to the end is not really explicit consent. You also get quite a few questions in that compare IDA to other apps or wallets, for example, IRMA from the Dutch Rabobank University, but also identity wallets like Google, Apple, and Samsung. So how would you compare IDA to those other developments?
Yeah, I think that IRMA from the Radboud University is indeed a solution that's close to our one. Like in self-sovereign identity, as mentioned, there are standards that are being used, and we have implemented those, and I think IRMA has implemented that also more or less the same way. So we are both decentralized identity wallets, and I think IRMA is also a great example of a technology that wants to achieve more or less the same as we want to achieve. I think for Google Apple Wallet, it's a bit different, because it's just a place where you can store easily some of your documents, but only for yourself. There's not a very easy way where a verifier, so that's a party which want to receive data from such a wallet can connect to, and also all the data you store in there cannot be trusted automatically, because it's not from a trusted source, and it's not always
really
signed
verifiable
data.
Credentials, and they're credentials but not verifiable credentials. In the system. As such, IDA it's not a banking product. So why does Rabobank do this? What kind of use cases do you foresee for applications like IDA?
We are working on a lot of use cases at the moment. So I already mentioned a few, like the car rental, mortgages, and of course the field lab events. But we're also working, for example, with social housing corporations, where we can do also some kind of income test in the identity in the IDA wallet. And you can also share additional personal information when you do an application for social housing. And also for commercial housing, we do the same. Other use cases we are working on are, for example, switching your utility contract. So, for example, your phone contract can be. Then you can also make use of IDA to submit all your personal data. And what we notice is that all those companies that receive your data really have an advantage, because they receive it in a structured way and they can trust on all the data. And I think as Rabobank. From Rabobank perspective, we focus on, as said, adjacent services as a bank, and one of those can be that we are more or less the data. We take a role of data custodian, so that we take good ownership over your data. Even though with IDA we don't see any of your personal data that's stored in your wallet, but we at least facilitate the infrastructure that makes personal data sharing possible in a safe way.
Mm-hmm. You also foresee certain business models related to this, or is that still very much open to discussion?
No, we have in mind some business models. What we experience also, of course, with our own mortgage process, that a lot of documents are submitted to us as a bank, and it takes a lot of time to verify all the documents, to type them into some systems. So I think, on the verify side, so the data the party that's receiving the data, they can really reduce cost and also create safer processes. Because of course, since all the data that is signed, that is submitted to the party, we can really trust in it, and we know it's the real data we get as a bank, and that's quick. And in that way, we can also create safer processes. Yeah. So we foresee that at least the party that's receiving data will pay in some way for those data.
So the relying party benefits, so it should also have have some kind of payment or things in the business model.
And that's also what we try to validate with our innovation funnel. That so we look at where's the willingness to pay in a solution that we've built, and that's most of the times on the verifier side. Indeed.
Okay. Thank you, David. Really great to have you here. If you have any further questions, David will stay here and we'll also have some time for questions after our second guest in a joint discussion with Sylvie. But before we move to our second guest, we have some interesting news that we would like to share with you. Both customers as well as users of ReadID trust us with very privacy-sensitive information. And we at Innovala have the responsibility not only to be secure, but also to show that we are secure. We do this through certifications granted by independent auditors. And we're really, really proud that besides the ISO 27001 standard and the more privacy-specific extension ISO 27701, Innovala now has the EIDAS module certification for qualified trust service providers, as well as has passed a conformity assessment for EIDAS electronic identification at assurance level high. All our certifications have been assessed by the well-known and accredited German-Austrian auditor TÜV. What this means is that we are the first and only technology provider in the identity verification industry with a certified automated solution for qualified trust service providers. And as said, we're quite proud of it. Obviously, those EIDAS certifications are not only relevant for trust service providers or electronic identity providers. All organizations that need to prove the identity of their end users can trust. These certifications allow them to do so with ReadID in a proven, secure and trustworthy manner. In a next webinar, we'll dive into the details of what this means and how that makes your life as a customer of ReadID easier, and how it reduces your audit efforts tremendously. So more details will follow on our website in the next few days, so stay tuned. After this great news, let us now move to our second guest, Sylvie van der Velde from itsme.
Hi.
Welcome, Sylvie. Good to have you here. Yeah, it was very unfortunate that you could not come, but traveling even such a short distance over country borders has proven not to be that easy, isn't it?
No, too many administrations and authorizations to have. It was really tough, so I had to do it from home.
No IDA app that could help you out there this time. Sylvie is from Belgian Mobile ID, itsme. Sylvie has a background in business management and joined Belgian Mobile ID 4 years ago. She's responsible for business development and marketing. Great that you could join us now virtually from Brussels. To start off with, Sylvie, as not everybody may know itsme that well, could you tell a bit more about what itsme is and what services you deliver?
So Belgium Mobile ID created in 2016 a consortium of the 4 big banks and the 3 telecom operators in Belgium. And they gave actually to the team of Belgium Mobile ID the challenge to create a digital identity. So we launched a digital identity called itsme in May 2017. As from that day on, we had 6 partners together with us and 2 ministers that were on stage supporting the digital identity. And a very huge milestone for us was January 2018, when we got recognized by the Belgian government as a digital identity. So in Belgium, it's a little bit different. We like to do it different, is that the government didn't want to create a digital identity. They created an electronic identity, so our identity card. But they said, let's leave the private sector create a digital identity. So it was a royal decree where we actually put our candidature to become one of the possible digital identities in Belgium, and still the only one today. So as from that day on, we, of course, the number of users started to increase. We had the banks using itsme in their flows to identify and to make some payments, but we had the insurance sector, we had the health sector. We also, in 2019, added a new service that is a signing service. And so itsme continued to grow. In end of 2019, we were also recognized on European level. So a level of assurance high. So also the Belgians were living outside of Belgium could use their itsme to log in to the public services of the country where they live in. Our 3rd anniversary, we celebrated it with 2 million users, and I think we will celebrate our 4th anniversary with 3 million users, because now we're around 2.8 million, so it's around 30% of the Belgian population, and it's used quite a lot. We're around 10 million actions each month now, so last year we did 90 million. And as you see, the 2 peaks in my red line, I think you all know these moments, so that there were the 2 lockdowns, because a lot of the application needed to be done online, and itsme was used in these processes. So itsme, as I said, is a digital identity, but also recognized. I think the same as you, it's very important to have the right standards and the right certification. So ISO 27001 was one of the first one that we got. But as we are also one of the providers in the financial sectors, following these guidelines is very important. So we are following the one of AML, because itsme is also used in KYC processes at the bank. We're also following the guidelines from AML5 that will come very soon. We have also adapted our app for the PSD2 flows, because as you know, as a strong customer authentication, you need to have a multi-factor authentication, what was not a problem, but also the dynamic linking. So when itsme, when you give your consent, you know where you give your consent for. So you always have a lot of detail that appears on your screen before you say that it's okay. And then from the ADAS level, at one part, we are level of assurance high for the Belgian identities. And at the other part, we are also qualified trust service provider, because we are delivering next to the identity also signatures, and it's the qualified electronic signature. And of course, we are privacy by design. So following the GDPR rules, I think it's not the most difficult part, because it's part of our DNA, but of course, a very crucial one. That privacy of our users is respected through the flows. So to give you just some insight about how we created actually that digital identity. So for us, it's a tool and a way so that we can share data on a secure way and in full transparency. So as said before, the user needs to be in control, but it's not only to be in control, but also to be aware of which information is sent and to whom. So the first one is, most of the time we call it identification or shared data. And when you do that action, actually you see to whom you're sending your data to. So you can see, for example, that it's to your bank. That is for creating an account. And then you have the list of the identity information that is shared. In the Belgian itsme version, we have all the same fields that on our EID cards, and we added 2 other fields. It's the telephone number and it's the email address. So when you want to sign up for open an account, you can see then in your itsme app that you want to share it with your bank, for example, that they need it to become a client, and then you have the whole list of the data. And once you give your consent, you give your itsme code in, or we use biometrics, then your information is sent to the one who asked for it. But itsme is also used as a login. Because when you become a client, of course, afterwards you want to get access to your bank account or access to the account that you just had. And you can use the same tool, actually. So you can use itsme to grant access to some information. That's actually the service that the government is using. So thanks to my itsme, I can access my health information, I can access my taxes, or some other services that is done given by the government. itsme is also used for the banking sector. We have a lot of card readers in Belgium when we want to access our bank. So actually it replaces the card reader. But it can also be granting access for very specific and sensitive data to your public health insurance, to your insurance, also to check the different tickets that you bought. We had Air Belgium also as a client. So it's to grant access to login or to connect. The third one is the confirmation service. So that's the one that is PSD2 compliant. It's used today a lot in the banking, the banking world, because it's when you want to confirm a payment, but actually is also a service that can be used when you want to give consent. The difference between the first two and this one is that context is given within the transaction. So you confirm that you want to, for example, do a payment, and then you have, of course, the amount of the payment and the IBAN number where you're sending to. But you could also confirm, for example, that you want to change your subscription of your internet provider. So this is also quite a very generic, I would say, service that can be used in different ways. And as the same way, the other elements can be the other services, you can also share data. So, for example, on a ticket, you can say, I give my confirmation that I want to attend an event, and unfortunately, we can't go dancing in Belgium, but that would be a very nice use case, and where I can share actually my name and surname during the same service. And last but not least, around our digital identity, we also added the signature. So with itsme, you can put an advanced signature, but that service, you have a qualified electronic signature, meaning that you will sign with the personal certificates. So these are the 4 services that we created around our itsme app.
Great, great. As you already mentioned, Belgium had already an extensive infrastructure using the electronic identity cards. So is this step towards EIDs, is that replacing the electronic identity cards, or is it complementing it? How do the two relate also in the near future?
Well, actually, you cannot use your itsme if you're stopped in the street by your police agent asking you for identity. So there is always the EID card that needs to be used. But in all online services, actually, you could replace your EID by your itsme. That wasn't the reasons why in Belgium they asked the private sector for a solution, is because the EID card is a very good solution, but was only used on the public sector. It was very difficult, for example, to a bank to ask their clients, please connect with your card reader and need your EID card to access your bank account. So it was not user-friendly enough. So that's why we created itsme. So we have the same security as the EID card, the same level of assurance, but we add the privacy part, because at itsme you don't need to share all the data that is needed, because we can activate it field by field. With the EID card, all information is sent at once in a batch, actually. And you have it, of course, on your mobile phone. We all have it in our pocket. So it means that for convenience, it's much better.
Yeah, so the head start that Belgium had with its electronic identity card also led to some technological disadvantages, and the way you do it now should circumvent those difficulties, make it user friendly, and make it modern, make it future proof. Also, people are asking, well, when are you coming to the Netherlands? Or well, you have plans to expand beyond Belgium. What markets do you want, or are you going to move first to, and why?
Well, indeed, the identity has been created based on the Belgian EID. We first started there to be in our comfort zone in our own country, but indeed, in a few weeks, we will cross borders in a digital way. Even I can't, but we will come to the Netherlands. The itsme app will be available very soon in the Netherlands, and then in a few months, once we have turned the first pilots in the Netherlands, also to Luxembourg. We always have, the very logic of Benelux. A lot of solutions are created like that. So these were the first step that we wanted to take, because in the Netherlands and in Luxembourg, they also have very good identity documents. And it's not saying that France is not that good, but as we know, their identity card isn't that digital or electronic as the one that we have in Belgium and in the Netherlands.
Yeah, you touch on a sensitive point there. You were using ReadID to do that expansion in the same way that ReadID is used to load credentials into the IDA app. Why did you choose ReadID?
Well, we were looking, of course, because the work that we did in Belgium, so to create an itsme account in Belgium, you could do it with your EID card, but as I said, then you need a card reader and a PC or a laptop. And we also worked together with the banks. So actually, we used the bank cards to retrieve the identity information from the banks. But we did it with the 4 major banks, so it was a huge work for the banks, but also at our site, because then you had to do an integration bank by bank. If we wanted to go beyond Belgium and we had to approach each bank to tell them that they had to do a lot of work at their side and at our side, we just knew it was not possible. So we were looking for a solution that was as secure as we put the bar high. So we needed to have also a provider that put the bar even as higher as high as ours, and that was actually compatible for whole Europe. So that's the reason that ReadID was selected in that process. We couldn't do it in 2016 because, of course, things need to evolve. But when we spotted it, so we started the implementation, and it's almost ready to be used.
Yeah. So that's also a good use case of why the EIDAS standardization and the EIDAS high levels of assurance is such a great asset in the European ecosystem. We have also some questions. Given time, I'd like to move to some questions that are popping in that might be interesting to you as well. We have a question also from Francesco. It's on the technical side. It's on the integration of itsme. When using itsme, is it also integratable via APIs, for example, SAML or OpenID, into existing applications? How does that work, or does that work?
Yes, indeed. We have the technical interface between itsme and our customers is an OpenID Connect implementation. We chose also OpenID Connect because of the security, but also because of the user convenience. OpenID Connect, for example, when you have an implementation on your smartphone, the itsme app opens automatically. So that's also the kind of customer experience that we were looking for, and OpenID Connect allows it. And it's through the OpenID Connect solution that you have the connection, but also that the data is shared.
Yeah. You already mentioned that besides the identity, you also share other attributes, like, for example, simple things like the email address or a phone number, but that can extend. That's a different market from being an identity provider or trusted service provider. How do you see that market, and also maybe compare it to what David told about IDA? What's in it for itsme? Why move there?
Well, that's indeed the next step, because we always talk about the digital identity, and it can be very broad, because actually everything that defines my identity or is part of me and that is digital is a digital identity. So for us, we have at the core of digital identity, the trusted identity, what we have today in the itsme app. But there are a lot of attributes around it that also define my identity, or that is needed in use cases, such as we explained before. itsme is a centralized digital identity. That's a decision that we make for security reasons and also to pass all the different accreditation. So the data is not stored on the smartphone. So the smartphone is the key to access and to give the consent to share the data. So the data is stored at our site. And we also knew that if we wanted to add the attribute to solve the processes of our clients, having that in a centralized way was not a good thing to do. So that's why we said we will continue to manage the digital identity in a centralized way, the same way that we're doing today. But for the attributes, we will not put them into itsme, but we will connect with them and make sure that the transfer is easier. So it's a hybrid model that we will create, a centralized ID for your core identity and decentralized attributes. And actually, itsme will be the tool that will actually share the data from these different data islands. That's the way that we call it internally. So, for example, we are working on the KYC process or the CDD process of a bank, where you need your digital identity, but you also need some other information that are stored in different data sources. We will use itsme so that I am identified to that data source. That is indeed my attributes that is shared with the bank. And through your itsme app, you will be able to give the consent for your identity, but also for the attributes, saying that it can be shared for a bank. Also, one of the very important reasons why we didn't gather these attributes within the itsme app is because each of these attributes has also its own lifecycle management. If I can say, for example, the driving license, and I want to rent a car, it's not important that I have a driving license, but I'm also allowed to drive the day that I want to rent a car. Yep. So it's a moving target, I would say, or it's a moving attribute, or so that's why we decided to keep it decentralized, but always use itsme as a tool to give the consent that data can be shared in a very transparent way.
Yeah, so the itsme there focuses more on consent management. Either focuses more also on the attribute sharing. So different architectures with different reasons and also different application areas. We're kind of running out of time, despite the interesting discussion. So there are still a few questions that are in the chat there, and we'll make sure that we pass them on to David and to Sylvie. But we have to move on. Thank you very much, Sylvie, for your presentation and this discussion. Before we close off, I would like to mention that you can visit us virtually, not physically, of course, next week at the 12th Global Banking Innovation Forum and Expo, where Maarten Wegdam, our CEO, will present on Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central European Time. We'll share the link with you if you want to join us there. Thank you for attending our webinar. We would love to see you back in the future editions, and we'll definitely keep you posted on what we'll be talking about. Feel free to give your feedback or suggestions on topics that you would like to hear us talk about or like to discuss. We'll stay available to answer your questions also on the chat, the questions that are left over. Thank you again, David. Thank you again, Sylvie, for joining us here and for your great contributions. For now, stay healthy. Keep on innovating. Goodbye and tot ziens.